It is Friday, December 2nd. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back. It's actually been somewhat of a slower news week, if you can believe it, or at least it feels that way, but usually around the holidays it's where it slows down a bit, so after next week, which is the Game Awards, that's kind of our last major show for the year, so once that's done, it should quiet down a bit, but we still have stories to go over today, so as always, let's start with our PS Plus reminder. This is your last call to grab the November Essential Games. Get that done. December 6th, it's going to change over to Mass Effect Legendary Edition on PS4, Biomutant on PS4, PS5, and then also Divine Knockout Founders Edition. Brand new game, PS4, PS5, launching right into Plus. So not too often that happens, but always nice when it does. And so we don't know how good that game is going to be, but that's something where you can certainly try it when it's launching on PS Plus. And then also, really for the month of December, it's not like, amazing, but certainly there's one game in there, or games I should say, that stand out. So if you have not played Mass Effect, then this is a killer month. I mean, assuming you like that franchise when you finally try the Legendary Edition. These are 3 full-length games. They're fantastic. It's a ton of content. So really that alone, assuming you haven't played it or bought that collection of games, huge win on PS Plus. And also Biomutant, not too bad as well. But if you remember last week, we talked about our last call for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is leaving on December 20th. There's another game to add to that list, which is Pillars of Eternity, That one also leaves on December 20th as well, so be sure to check that out if you are interested. And then finally, there's new campaigns for PlayStation Stars, which I don't think they auto-start, so make sure you use the PS Mobile app and start them. You can just download some PS Plus games and try those out, and that's like an extra 50 points or something, so not too bad if you're planning on playing these games anyway. Now, moving on to our first news story, and also more PS Plus news here, but it does seem like we might already know what at least one PS Plus premium game for December is going to be, based on a premature store listing for Star Wars Battlefront 2 on PSP. Or at least we assume that's the case, because there's things that have popped up sooner on PSN, and they're still not live, but this very much is the PSP version listed under the Classics program, so it's got save states, rewind, video presets, things like that, and that's cool, but this is now the second time where they've opted for the PSP version instead of the superior PS2 one, where the first time was Toy Story 3 just recently, and the thing is, I really hope this is not Sony's Band-Aid fix in the short term, because really for those that played back then and know this well, PSP games back then, there was 2 situations that third-party devs usually chose from when it came to releasing on PSP, right? Where normally if they're shipping on everything, so that includes PS2, GameCube, Xbox, even GBA, but the standard console versions, they would always have to water those down to get that game ported over to PSP, and they would try to more or less port that entire game over as is, but just scale it back considerably, and that often led to a not very good PSP game. Otherwise, they would instead do a bespoke PSP version from the ground up, where it's doing its own thing, telling its own story, it's got its own mission structure, and whatever else, but basically it's its own PSP game from the ground up, and that was often a better route to take, right? And so clearly what Sony's doing here is sort of leaning on PSP games in lieu of releasing more PS2 games, where they have not released any new PS2 games since the Classics program on PS4. Even well after the PS Plus relaunch, we still have not had a new PS2 game, which, we've already talked about why, which is that there's a number of reasons, namely the emulator they built is not that good, so, it's fine on PS4, it gets the job done, but we're seeing compatibility issues on PS5. Also, there's no feature parity at this point, so they don't have rewind, save states, the video presets, and really the big problem, I would assume, is that the exploit that was published a few months ago about how those PS2 games running under the emulator that they built back then, some of those PS2 games have JIT privileges on PS5, and there's no way for Sony to really get around or patch that, and so I would presume they don't want to use that emulator anymore, and they're just looking at doing some kind of solution or building a new emulator to release, PS2 games again. I would hope that's what they're doing, because if this is their sort of short-term fix for the time being of just continuing to do PS1 and PSP stuff, and for PSP you're choosing just worse versions. And it's not like I don't want PSP games, but you know, the cool prospect of PSP on PS4 and PS5 is that, you know, there's now this open library of unique PSP stuff. I'm talking PSP exclusives. So it's cool to have things like No Heroes Allowed, Super Stardust Portable, Resistance Retribution, which should be coming, right? Like, lean into that stuff. Do more of that. Because that's, you know, really cool, you know, fantastic library to finally have open to a new audience. But, you know, don't do these, like, poor PSP ports of PS2 games, right? So I would hope that they're definitely working on a brand new emulator for PS2 and we'll finally see those come out. But it's just been, and we've said it before, but it's like just so disappointing that for premium at least, extra I still think has been largely fantastic, but premium, you know, how do you relaunch the service? And it seems like they were just not ready at all. So the emulator wasn't ready. You had no PS1 or PSP stuff lined up. It's just, you know, kind of silly. But at the very least, I do hope this is a short-term thing they're doing and not something long-term. I mean, if you're going to do the PSP versions, that's fine, but then give me the PS2 one as well. Now, lately, there has been this balancing act of Sony doing something wrong, but then they also fix something, or they do something right, or they change something on PSN, and that's what this is, where they added a demo category on PSN across PS5, PC, and mobile. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but this really highlights how important discoverability is for a storefront, because now having demos, you know, front-facing on the PlayStation Store, say, right on console, shows you what you were missing, because even I did not realize just how many demos there were on PSN, even more so because for PS5 at least, a lot of PS4 demos are blacklisted from being playable on PS5, so I was surprised to see just how many there were, because there's now a category showing me exactly how many demos are on PSN. And it's not like demos are like completely dead per se, like they're still around, developers do them every so often, they're just not as prevalent as 10, 15 something years ago, but at the very least, you now have a proper directory showing you all the back catalog of demos on PSN, and these are true demos. You don't need to be a Plus member. They're not PS Plus trials where they unlock the full game, you know, for an extended period of time, and you also get a trophy list on your account. These are bespoke, free demos. You're allowed to, you know, download them whenever you want, and it's nice to have them on the PS Store as their own category. It should have been there a while ago, but hey, it's there now, and it does highlight how important discoverability really is. Next up, something else Sony finally did on PS5 was officially launch the Tournaments feature, which was in beta for a bit, but now it's finally here, where for the 3 games that support it, Guilty Gear Strive, FIFA 23, and also NBA 2K23, you know, you wouldn't see this feature unless you're playing these games, because it's something where it's baked into the card system, so that's where you can see the new tournaments pop up. You can sign up for a tournament, see what time they start, and also there's now the updated tournament brackets where there's a cap on each bracket, so it streamlines how long each tournament takes. And there's also the new UI, so you can see the bracket breakdown more easily. But yeah, that feature is finally here, and something else Sony also did was start a new Discord community where it's not on console, obviously. There's nothing like that just yet, but on the PS blog, there's an invite link. You can join from there, and so they're also starting some community engagement, which is, you know, nice. But if you're into tournaments, I would say go check that out. And well, those are the first 3 games that support it so far. Now, if you're still looking to pre-order PSVR 2 and you did not get an invite on the first wave, you might have another shot very soon, because recently on PlayStation Direct, on the PSVR 2 product page, at least for a brief moment, I'm not sure if it's still there, I just checked and it's not, but it said there's going to be a PSVR 2 December 6th event, which that's not, I highly doubt that's a live stream or it's going to include announcements. It's not that. It's going to be, you know, likely another wave of invites going out, or I would presume invites will go out on December 5th, which will have the link that, you know, takes you to the PSVR 2 direct listing, where the queue will start around 10, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and that's where you can safely pre-order a PSVR 2 and have a nice, smooth transaction. So I know the whole invite thing is kind of annoying, but just make sure you're registered. Like I said, the first wave, super easy. I had 2 accounts that got invited, and days later they could still pre-order. So at least for this wave, this upcoming wave, should be this Tuesday, and I still expect there's going to be multiple waves where they'll do invites and then eventually open it up because, PSVR 2 is still relatively niche. We have no idea how well it will do, but assuming they make enough of them, it shouldn't be too bad to get one. Moving on to more Game of the Year award news, or in this case, it's Time Magazine's top 10 best games of 2022. So not quite a Game of the Year award, or at least I don't think they actually define it that way, but let's just run through their top 10. So number 10 was TMNT Shredder's Revenge. Number 9, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. Number 8, Resident Evil Village Shadow of Rose. Number 7, Sifu. 6, The Last of Us Part 1. 5, Stray. 4, Elden Ring. 3, The Quarry. 2, Horizon Forbidden West. And number 1, God of War Ragnarok. So congrats to Santa Monica. As we've said before, there's many publications that do this. So I think it is going to be largely a battle of Elden Ring and Ragnarok across many different sites and publications. But Ragnarok certainly picked up a pretty big one from a well-known publication, but, much like we said with Stray, where Stray was ranked pretty high on different sites, now you've got something here where they've got Elden Ring in a weird spot where The Quarry and Forbidden West are above that, right? And so, and I would also say Stray was questionably low. I mean, I don't really know how to feel about that, but, everyone has different tastes, different opinions, and they are going to come to different conclusions. But I am curious to see towards the end, between those two, which one is going to edge out the most wins, because Ragnarok is definitely up there, but deservedly so is Elden Ring. Moving on to Gran Turismo 7. Recently, GT Planet was in Monaco for the Gran Turismo World Finals, where they were able to ask Kazunori Yamauchi about a possible PC version, and if he would consider it, and he responded with, and I quote, "Yes, I do think so. Gran Turismo is a very finely tuned title. There are not many platforms which could run the game in 4K 60p natively, so one way we make that possible is to narrow down the platform. It's not a very easy subject, but of course we are looking into it and considering it." Kind of a strange answer when there's a PS4 version, which is not that, but it's well known that the game was meant to be a PS5 exclusive, and then late into development they did a PS4 one, which as a racing simulator, it's kind of easy to scale down that versus other more ambitious projects. But either way, the game was on the NVIDIA leak a while ago alongside many other games, and also we know Sony's doing PC releases, so there's nothing shocking here. It's more a matter of when, not if. We can say that maybe it'll, be on time to launch 1 year after, which is what Herman Hulst at least outlined before, is that there's going to be about a 1 year delay from the console versions, which not every game thus far has followed that formula. We're still waiting on Returnal and also Demon's Souls, which, is pretty far behind at this point. Maybe also Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. We don't know about that game, but, the NVIDIA leak has not missed so far, and yeah, Sony is going to do this at some point, and PC, at least for a platform that has never had a Gran Turismo game, that could be a pretty big deal. Next up, I thought this one was pretty cool to see, which was a viral tweet of Horizon Forbidden West, where recently somebody shared a video clip of them in the water and the waves hitting the rocks, and they said that their jaw hit the floor looking at that, which then the Guerrilla Games studio and art director, quote, retweeted that and said, "Forbidden West wave system was one of the most complex systems we build. It uses sequences of images that contain 3D vector displacement to make it possible to have waves break and collapse on themselves, something that is hard to do, especially if it also needs to work on PS4. And this tweet went viral, 60,000 something likes, and so just based on that number alone, a lot of people were at least, there was at least a lot of impressions on this tweet. So always cool to see that recognition, right? Especially when, I've said before, I think there's so much more to Forbidden West than just purely visuals, but especially for a cross-gen game, it is just mind-blowing what Guerrilla Games has accomplished. And so for such a simple little thing like that, which Forbidden West has so many moments where it is just so jaw-droppingly gorgeous. For what is an open world game, it's just so dense, lush, vibrant, and there's so many different environments. So always cool to see the recognition that developers deserve. Now, something else that recently went viral on a few different sites and like different permutations, I guess, where people clipped it on Twitter, then it was put on Reddit, and some sites are reporting it, but it's for Forspoken, where that game has a near instant fast travel demonstrated during a live stream. I mean, you hit yes, and it's like, boom, it's immediate. No loading screen at all, which is certainly impressive, really cool, and that was kind of like the next-gen SSD dream that we were sold prior to PS5 coming out. And the thing is, some games do it that way. Not many, of course. In fact, I would say for as much of a quality of life jump it's been, for how fast games boot and how fast travel is, I almost get a bit annoyed when it's like, like, and this sounds so nuts, but like when it's not like 5 seconds and under, right? Because some games it's immediate, like for example Control, actually a third-party game, and that depends greatly on like how far away you are fast traveling. So if you're like in the same general area but you just need to get a little bit further, it's like immediate. Tsushima, which is fast across the board, so even on PS4 it's like a 6 to 8 second load screen. PS5, that one's immediate, but it's always nice to see that based on the systems in place for certain games and how certain developers build their title on PlayStation 5, that they can really leverage it in a way where their fast travel really is blazing quick, and Forspoken seems to be one of those games. Now, considering it's kind of a slow news week, I thought we'd also bring this up real quick, which is the recent file size revealed for Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. So dialing back to the fast travel thing with Forspoken and how some games actually are as fast as we were told prior to PS5 launching. Another thing was the crack in compression on PlayStation 5 and how games actually might be smaller. And going over 2 years, there's actually it's been well documented at this point that absolutely PS5 games on average are smaller than PS4. Sometimes by a little bit, and yes, sometimes PS5 is a bit larger, and it's highly dependent on the game and how it was made and what assets are in that game. But generally speaking, there is absolutely a delta of games being smaller on PlayStation 5. Sometimes it's very easy to see when you check out directly on PSN and you're offered the option of downloading the PS4 or PS5 version. So most people get to actually see this. But with Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, that game, it's half the size on PS5, so about 20 gigs versus 41.5 something on PS4. So that's also, I guess, important to always remind ourselves of every so often, is that these consoles in many ways are delivering exactly what Sony and Microsoft were trying to sell people early on, is that they boot up very fast, you're in the game quickly, and at least on the PlayStation side, the file sizes are in fact much smaller. Now, getting into our next story about Geoff Keighley's The Game Awards. Or really it's more about Final Fantasy XVI, because recently it's been confirmed that the producer Naoki Yoshida is going to be doing some kind of special live presentation, and also this game was recently rated in not Korea but Brazil. And more notably, we also had the Snitch Twitter account put out a new tweet basically inferring, teasing that the release date for this game is going to be June 22nd, 2023. Because remember, the way that this account likely gets their info is they can see YouTube unlisted videos. They have some kind of access to the YouTube backend, and that's how they typically have this stuff right before it's going to be announced. And so there's probably going to be a new trailer at the Game Awards for this game confirming the release date, which also we can just say more broadly, I suspect that we might see more leaks for the Game Awards before the show actually does air, which if you're in Europe that might be good, at least because it's kind of at an ungodly hour for you all, which sucks, but maybe this works out better. But it just depends on how publishers choose to do their YouTube uploads, because some like to do it day of, but a lot of them tend to upload videos early because just logistically it makes more sense to make sure the video is uploaded, there's nothing wrong, it looks good, and so based on how they usually see these things, they might put out more leaks ahead of time before the show actually airs. Now this one is pretty interesting. Sony recently revealed a new mocap or at-home mocap range of devices called Mocapi. So basically these are, as I just said, it's a new at-home motion capture device where you affix these to your ankles, wrists, hips, your head, and it'll track your motion and apply that to a virtual avatar in real time. And this is primarily targeted towards creators and the metaverse, so you can import your captures into software like Unity and Motion Builder, and it's also confirmed that it will be compatible and supported in VR chat as well. Now, I can't stress this enough. This is very much a Sony Electronics kind of thing, right? Especially where it's, heavily marketed in Japan, right? So this is not like some sort of major product being marketed globally. And there's a lot of products that Japan gets that the West either doesn't see, or it kind of has a slow rollout, or there's no direct involvement with, say, SIE, where like that's obviously the kind of partnership where we would look at it and think maybe something would happen there. I would figure that's not going to happen, but with the popularity of VR chat and also PSVR 2 coming out very soon, I do see it come up quite often, especially with us looking at PlayStation Home's recent revival. Some like to bring up if Sony will do, Home again, or, because Home was like ahead of its time, right? So like that was more of an engaging metaverse versus what we see nowadays. But will Sony revisit it in some way, do it on PSVR 2, or will they try and get VR chat on PSVR 2? I mean, the speculation I know runs a bit wild, but I think the boring answer here is that none of those things happen. But in terms of Sony, the entire Sony group, they are definitely going to be looking at things like the metaverse and exploring it and trying to find a way to monetize it and make it work for them. Which I think the better approach is to maybe just wait and let somebody kind of at least figure out a decent angle of how it works. But all companies like to do R&D and just get their toes wet, and so that's what Sony's doing in this case with Mocapi. Moving on to our next story, you probably heard about this one already. It was one of the bigger stories from this past week, which was Sony actually played a pretty big role in aiding development for the Callisto Protocol, where they not only lent out their mocap facilities, but Sony had anywhere from 100 to 150 people working on that game directly, and that was because of PlayStation Studios' Visual Arts Group, which is a jack-of-all-trades support group that does animation, cinematics, mocap, things like that, and they often rent out that space to other developers, aiding development directly if they are contracted out. And so in the credits for the Callisto Protocol, there's over 100-something people from not only Visual Arts, but also PlayStation's support studio in Malaysia as well. They worked on this game too. And so this isn't terribly uncommon, so I know it was new info to some people, but there's been plenty of third-party games that have used that space if they are in close proximity to California, and it just makes sense financially. And in this case, it's something where Sony's actually being paid, right? Because they're lending out that mocap space, and they're providing aid to those developers for that project, and that can happen, right? It's like renting out anything else. If the facilities aren't being used, you might as well make some money out of it. And so it's always cool to have little anecdotes and stories like that pop up. It doesn't always have to lead to exclusivity either. So at least in this case, they've got marketing rights for the Callisto Protocol, but it doesn't always have to be something where we need a timed exclusive, or we need to own the IP, because like that stuff was pretty bad, let's say around PS3 era and lower. So pretty much all the console manufacturers, that was normally how they did business. If they were going to be involved in a game in any way, they almost always said, okay, here's the contract, which we're going to own the IP. It's wholly ours, and it's only on our console. We get to do whatever we want with it, right? And so that's usually how they did business, and that's how they have a massive catalog of IP. Sony owns things that you probably didn't know they owned, because that's how they used to do things, and they all used to do that. But nowadays, we should count our blessings that that's not the case. So between the big three, they're much more lenient, and they can support devs in a number of ways with different programs, and it doesn't always have to lead to locking down the ownership of that game. Next up, for the Last of Us HBO TV series, we have more promotional materials that were recently released. A set of posters for all the actors on this project, so they're all there, which it's kind of cool to see them presented in a way where they're portraying their character. So you've got Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, Anna Torv, Merle Dandridge, Gabriel Luna, Nick Offerman, Murray Bartlett as Frank. That's cool to see, right? So that's where we can already see the show is going to deviate a bit, or at least, be able to tell a story in a certain way that the game didn't have time to do, or at least it wasn't planning on doing it for the budget and, whatever else they were doing on PlayStation 3 at the time. But, as we said before, they're going to be doing things like that with the show, taking certain liberties and exploring it in a different manner. But really cool to see all their characters being portrayed this way. Also a basic sort of general poster, which is very reminiscent of the original box art, which is really cool. And so, even if the show is bad, at the very minimum, it's just been great to see, all the love and care that went into the authenticity of The Last of Us. You can even see Isha's drawings in the one picture, or the one banner for Kayvon Woodard, and so you just got to figure there's going to be so much of that when the show finally airs January 15th, and that's just going to be a really cool thing to experience. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. And if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel in a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about to you all from this past week, and our Tuesday video was more of a casual conversation about trophies. So it's been a while since we talked about what I've been up to and playing and all that, and just sort of an easier upload to do in between some of the bigger stuff that's coming for this month in December, which it's going to be a bit more hectic for me in the next 2 or so weeks. I'll talk more about that when the time comes, but until then, that is it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.